Dreams in the Witch House. Released in 2023 and developed by Atom Brain Games, Dreams in the Witch House takes Lovecraft's 1930s short story and stretches it into a visual novel mixed with survival mechanics. At first glance, it looks like a life simulator. You step into the role of Walter Gilman, a young student renting a room in a rundown Arkham boarding house. Your daily routine seems simple: attend classes, manage money, eat and sleep. But even in that opening cycle, something feels wrong. The boarding house itself radiates unease. The walls are cracked, the furniture mismatched, and the attic above your room seems to creak far too often at night. As Walter studies mathematics and folklore, the game begins to blur reality with nightmare. Sleep offers no rest. He dreams of endless angles and corridors, geometries that shouldn't exist. Shapes fold into one another, suggesting that the room he's living in connects to something outside of human understanding. The gameplay reinforces the dread. Every choice you make has a cost. Study too much and your health declines. Skip meals and Walter grows weaker, more vulnerable to the strange fevers creeping in. Sleep too little and the visions intensify until reality itself starts bending. Before long, rats appear that don't behave like rats. Shadows stretch unnaturally across walls, and whispers suggest that Walter's presence in the house was never an accident. By the midpoint, the novel traps you in its own pattern. You're constantly chasing balance, trying to stay sane, keep grades up, and uncover the truth of the boarding house. Yet every path feels like it's feeding something larger. The attic isn't just storage space, it's a portal, or a cage, or both. And Walter's pursuit of knowledge makes him part of the ritual, whether you resist it or not. What makes Dreams in the Witch House effective is how it translates Lovecraft's cosmic horror into interactivity. The story isn't simply told to you, it makes you live inside the dread of repetition, scarcity, and inevitability. Just like Walter, you realize too late that the search for forbidden knowledge only leads in one direction, deeper into the waiting dark. The Innsmouth Case. Released in 2020 and developed by Robot Pumpkin Games, The Innsmouth Case is a text-driven visual novel that feels like a branching detective story on the surface, but underneath, it hides the DNA of Lovecraft's most infamous seaside town. At the start, you take the role of a private investigator called in to solve a missing persons case. A mother pleads with you to find her daughter, Tabitha, who vanished in Innsmouth. It sounds like a straightforward job: travel to the town, follow the clues, bring the girl back. But the moment you arrive, something feels off. Innsmouth is not presented as a normal place. Its streets are narrow, its buildings leaning and damp. The people avoid your eyes, their faces strangely sunken, their gaits awkward and stilted. They offer no help, only suspicion, and sometimes hostility. The narrative splits quickly into dozens of choices. You can try the local inn, press townsfolk for answers, search the harbor, or wander into the twisted back alleys. Each decision opens new branches, but none of them feel safe. The humor of the game disarms you at first. Characters speak in absurd tones, situations feel bizarrely comedic, and your detective's inner commentary is often sarcastic. But underneath the jokes, the dread grows. The missing girl's trail doesn't just lead through shady characters, it drags you deeper into the cult that rules the town, worshipping the ocean and the things that dwell beneath it. The deeper you go, the clearer it becomes that your choices aren't about success or failure, they're about how quickly you'll be swallowed. And this is where the Innsmouth Case works as cosmic horror. Every path ends badly. The game has dozens of possible conclusions, but not one of them provides clarity or triumph. You might be sacrificed in a ritual, absorbed into the cult, vanish into the sea, or simply disappear without explanation. Even the rare survivor outcomes leave questions unanswered. What really happened to Tabitha? Was she ever meant to be found? Or was she bait, pulling you into the same current that has drowned so many before? The brilliance of the Innsmouth Case is that it cloaks Lovecraft's oppressive dread inside comedy. The player laughs at the strangeness, but laughter doesn't save you. It only softens you for the inevitable turn, when the story reminds you that in Innsmouth, every road leads back to the sea, and no detective can outthink what waits in the dark water. Saya no Uta. First published in 2003 by Nitro Plus, Saya no Uta, The Song of Saya, is infamous in visual novel history for how far it pushes the boundary of horror. Written by Gen Orubuchi, it opens not with monsters or rituals, but with the story of a man named Fuminori who survives a car accident. After emergency brain surgery, his perception of the world changes completely. What should look normal, people, food, everyday objects, now appear to him as grotesque rotting masses. Human faces twist into melted flesh, voices sound like distorted screeches, and the air itself feels wrong. Fuminori lives inside this warped vision every day, trapped between sanity and collapse. His friends try to support him, but to his eyes, they are nightmares in human skin. Just as he edges toward despair, he meets a young girl named Saya. She looks human to him, beautiful and untouched by the corruption that covers everything else. To the player, though, Saya is something else entirely. Not a girl, but an alien being whose presence warps reality itself. The story becomes a descent into obsession. Fuminori clings to Saya as the only anchor in his collapsing world, and together they form a relationship that veers between tender and horrific. She protects him, he worships her, and both become complicit in acts that spiral far beyond morality. Neighbors vanish, friends grow suspicious, and the line between love story and nightmare completely erodes. What makes Saya no Uta so disturbing isn't only the gore or shock value, it's the way the novel forces you to live inside Fuminori's perspective. You don't just read about madness, you see the world through it. The game traps you in a perception where truth itself is unreliable, where the one thing that looks pure and kind to the protagonist is in fact the most dangerous creature he could embrace. At its core, Saya no Uta explains the horror of perception. It asks a question no other visual novel dares to. If your reality shattered and you could only trust one person, what would you sacrifice to keep them? The answer, as the story shows, is everything. Slay the Princess. Released in 2023 by Black Tabby Games, Slay the Princess disguises itself as a simple fairy tale quest, only to unravel into one of the most complex pieces of psychological and cosmic horror in the visual novel genre. At the start, the premise is almost laughably straightforward. You, the player, are told by a calm narrator that a princess is locked in the basement of a cabin in the woods. Your job is to slay her. That's it. But the moment you descend the stairs and meet the so-called princess, the story fractures. She doesn't act like a monster. She pleads, argues, and sometimes sits calmly as if she already knows your next move. The game splinters into loops, each run resetting with slight changes depending on what you chose before. Sometimes the princess is fragile and scared. Sometimes she's manipulative, and sometimes she's openly monstrous. But in every loop, her presence grows more overwhelming, as though she's not one person, but an endless series of variations collapsing into one another. The narrator, too, is part of the trap. His calm instructions to slay the princess become more insistent, more desperate as you resist or hesitate. At times he feels trustworthy, at others he feels complicit in the deception. The game's structure makes it impossible to know who's telling the truth. Is the princess a world-ending threat, or is the act of slaying her the very trigger that destroys everything? What makes Slay the Princess cosmic horror isn't gore or spectacle, it's inevitability. No matter how many loops you endure, no matter how you approach the princess, the outcome always carries you closer to the realization that the story cannot be escaped. The branching paths give you the illusion of choice, but the more you play, the clearer it becomes that every path folds back into the same collapse. In the end, the princess isn't just a character, she's the embodiment of inevitability itself. She shifts into whatever form the player needs to see, absorbing all resistance, all hesitation, until the act of trying to define her only strengthens her. And when the credits roll, you're left with the same crushing weight that defines all cosmic horror, the sense that you were never in control, and that what you feared most was not the monster in the basement, but the futility of fighting fate. The Shrouded Isle. Back in 2017, developer Kitfox Games created The Shrouded Isle, a cult management visual novel where the horror isn't hidden in shadows, it's written into every choice you make. On the surface, the game plays like strategy. You're the high priest of a village awaiting the awakening of an ancient god. Each season, you must guide the community, manage 5 influential families, and keep the cult obedient through rituals and sacrifice. The mechanics seem simple. Assign tasks, ensure faith remains strong, and root out disobedience. But beneath the numbers and text, the dread takes hold. The families you oversee are not just resources, they are people with secrets. Some are heretics, some are liars, some are dangerous in ways you won't uncover until it's too late. You need their support, yet you must also offer them up when the god demands blood. Every decision corrupts something: loyalty, purity, or stability. What makes the novel horrifying isn't just one jump scare or a single monster reveal, it's the slow erosion of morality. With each sacrifice, the community grows more fearful, but the cult grows stronger. You find yourself justifying cruelty, excusing brutality, because the god must be appeased. By the time the final ritual arrives, you realize you've become complicit in building the very nightmare you were meant to resist. The Shrouded Isle works as cosmic horror because it strips away the illusion of choice. You think you're managing, balancing, keeping the cult stable, but every path leads to corruption. The god doesn't care which family survives or which follower dies, it only wants obedience, And in the end, you don't beat the game, you reveal yourself as one more believer willingly feeding the abyss. World of Horror. In 2023, Panstas finally brought World of Horror out of early access, and the result is one of the most unique blends of cosmic dread and retro visuals ever made. At first glance, it looks like a lost MS-DOS game, a black and white 1-bit interface, blocky portraits, and harsh pixel lines. But behind that lo-fi aesthetic is a roguelike visual novel that feels like both a love letter to Junji Ito and a direct descendant of Lovecraft's slow-burn terror. The premise is deceptively simple. You're trapped in a small Japanese town as the world tips toward apocalypse. The old gods are awakening, reality itself is cracking, and the only way forward is to investigate mystery after mystery across different districts. Each run forces you to choose paths. Chase down a rumor, explore an abandoned building, visit a shrine, or face whatever lies in the hospital, the school, or the forest. What makes World of Horror so powerful is how it builds dread not from a single story, but from accumulation. Every choice adds stress, every encounter chips away at your stamina or your reason. A classroom rumor about a faceless man leads to a missing teacher. A strange rash on your arm might spread until it consumes you. The town itself feels cursed, filled with neighbors who look almost normal, but not quite. And when the gods finally break through, it's not a surprise. It's the confirmation of something you felt coming all along. Mechanically, the game locks you into cycles of risk and punishment. Resting at home heals you, but burns precious time. Investigation increases doom, the measure of how quickly the apocalypse arrives. And combat feels less like victory and more like desperation, every hit reducing sanity as much as it reduces the enemy. At its core, World of Horror explains cosmic dread in a way few visual novels attempt. There's no true ending where everything is saved. The gods cannot be defeated, only delayed, and every run ends with the same lesson. Survival is temporary, knowledge is costly, and the end always arrives, no matter how many times you try again. Dagon by H.P. Lovecraft. Released in 2021 by BitGolem, Dagon is a short kinetic visual novel that directly adapts Lovecraft's 1919 story of the same name. Unlike most visual novels, this one strips away choice almost entirely. Instead, it immerses you in a single narrative, the confession of a World War I veteran whose life unravels after a shipwreck leaves him stranded in a nightmarish oceanic landscape. The experience begins with something familiar, a man alone in his study, recounting his memories. His voice is weary, scattered, soaked in the sense that he has seen something beyond comprehension. Through his words, the story shifts back to the sea, where he escapes a German vessel and finds himself drifting in open water. Days pass and the waves carry him to a place that should not exist, a slimy, half-submerged wasteland reeking of rot. The pacing is slow, almost suffocating. Each description of the terrain, each step across the blackened ground, builds the sense that the sailor has entered a realm outside of human dominion. Eventually, he reaches a monolith covered in carvings, depictions of creatures that look both fish-like and human, locked in rituals that suggest an ancient order hidden beneath the sea. And then, in one unforgettable moment, he sees it, a titan rising from the deep, its form towering and alien, its presence crushing any illusion of human significance. The visual novel ends not with answers, but with collapse. The sailor's sanity fractures, his narrative spirals into despair, and when the perspective returns to his study, the implication is clear. He has not been confessing to an audience, but to himself, moments before ending his life. What makes Dagon effective is its faithfulness. By preserving Lovecraft's original text and layering it with atmospheric visuals and narration, it doesn't modernize or soften the tale. Instead, it emphasizes the inevitability of cosmic horror, the idea that some truths cannot be witnessed without destroying the witness. The story never needed a twist, or a monster fight. It only needed one man staring too long into the abyss and being swallowed whole. Sucker for Love, First Date. Launched in 2022 by Akabaka and published by Dread XP, Sucker for Love, First Date flips the expectations of both dating sims and Lovecraftian horror on their heads. At first glance, it looks like a parody. Brightly colored visuals, bubbly character portraits, and a protagonist who wants nothing more than to romance eldritch deities. But beneath the comedy and absurd charm, the game uses its structure to explore obsession, ritual, and the danger of treating cosmic forces like playthings. The setup is deceptively simple. You, the unnamed main character, come into possession of a forbidden grimoire. Instead of fearing it, you eagerly use it to summon your first date. Not a human, but Lunetta, a goddess who resembles a tentacled Lovecraft-inspired being. What follows are branching scenes where the player attempts to balance affection with ritual. drawing sigils, chanting verses, and following strict instructions just to keep the date going. The humor lands quickly. Lynetta acts like a flirty love interest, speaking in affectionate tones while demanding offerings and terrifying rituals. As the game continues, other routes open up, introducing different love interests, each one a parody of a different cosmic archetype. They are drawn like dating sim heroines, but each carries with them the weight of something unfathomable. What makes Sucker for Love more than a joke is how it leans into its duality. The mechanics aren't just funny, they're unnerving. Mess up a chant or misdraw a sigil and the scene doesn't end in laughter, it ends in death, madness, or worse. The player is forced to confront the fact that every interaction with these beings, no matter how sweetly it's framed, is still a dangerous brush with forces beyond human comprehension. The deeper meaning becomes clear. Obsession, even when wrapped in romance and horror, has consequences. The protagonist doesn't fear the rituals because they look like dates, but the rituals themselves remain real, binding, and deadly. The game leaves you with the realization that no matter how much you soften an eldritch being with pastel art and playful dialogue, their nature doesn't change. They will always be vast, unknowable, and indifferent. And that's why Sucker for Love First Date works as cosmic horror. It lures you in with affection, laughter, and parody, then tightens the noose by reminding you that even love stories can become cults, and that even in dating, some gods cannot be tamed. And that wraps up part 1 of every cosmic horror visual novel explained. If you're looking for something that captures Lovecraft's spirit most faithfully, Dagon is a perfect starting point, short, sharp, and devastating in its inevitability. But if you want a blend of comedy and terror, Sucker for Love First Date shows how cosmic horror can wear a playful mask while still carrying teeth. Well, if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like the video, share your favorite cosmic horror visual novel in the comments, and subscribe so you don't miss part 2. We've got even stranger, darker titles lined up next, stories that bend reality in ways you won't see coming.